Colonel Davis, I want to ask you a question about this, just from your years at Guantanamo, because during the first 6 years of Guantanamo, and then spilling a little into now, there have been, by my count, over 600 detainees from Guantanamo Bay who have been returned home and are free. Some of them have likely been radicalized. Others are predicted to have been radicalized. Was there any discussion of this, to your knowledge, at Guantanamo Bay, where there was some idea that there were these 4 people who were being charged, and yet this sense that we were letting people go back that is now what everybody's afraid of in this particular debate that's going on?
There was some of that. In fact, one of the ironies, one of the jokes we used to make was in order to like David Hicks and Salim Hamdan are convicted war criminals, and they're free men. And you've got a couple of hundred other people that have never been charged, and they're still behind bars. So one of the jokes was you've got to lose in order to win. You know, you got to go to court and get convicted and get a misdemeanor punishment for being the worst of the worst in order to get to go home.
Okay, more questions from you? Yes.
Yeah, I'm having trouble reconciling how Common Article 3 can provide. Well, when I think Common Article 3, I think of undue command influence. The executive cannot be in charge of the court that charges you with a crime. And I'm trying to reconcile how Common Article 3 can be applied to the Military Commissions Act. They don't seem to reconcile in my mind.
Yeah, I think, and again, I think in the Hamdan decision, Justice Stevens said you really have to look at the additional Article 75, the additional protocol that kind of lays out what the fundamental rights recognized by civilized people are. And if you look at those rights and compare those to the Military Commissions Act, I think, in my view, you clear that bar. So it's a question of, you know, what, again, I think it goes back to what are the source of their rights? Do they have constitutional rights and Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights? I mean, if anything, the Bush administration may have conferred constitutional rights where otherwise they wouldn't have had we done this right from the start. But I think that, you know, the military commissions could satisfy the Geneva Convention requirement. And your same point would apply. You know, when I was on active duty, if I faced a court-martial, the commander-in-chief was still the commander-in-chief, and I was still prosecuted in that same system before the same panel of officers. You know, and I guess another comparison that, you know, in federal court it takes 12 people saying you're guilty, and a military commission or a court-martial will say 2/3 vote. So 4 is greater than 11 in a military commission. So I mean, it's not an apples and apples comparison.
Other questions? In the back.
I want to ask sort of a practical question. I think it seems pretty clear that colleague Sheikh Mohammed is going to end up in a military commission. So my question is, what's the half loaf that would make you happy?
Talking to us people. Happy is the wrong word. Yeah. Let me start out with sort of wiping away the last 8 years, because that has a lot to do with sort of the theoretical position. I do not oppose a properly constituted military commission to try war crimes. I think that what we have now is a situation that is too toxic in the context of what these military commissions are, and they also don't meet the standards that, at least for myself, in 30 years of litigating, have come to believe provide a reliable, fair, accurate adjudication of guilt or not guilt. And I don't think the military commissions are there. Could there be a military commission that says, yeah, the UCMJ provides that system? No one, we have never argued that the UCMJ, as it is constituted presently, would not provide a fair trial. Ironically, there are elements of the military system that are more favorable to defendants. Discovery is far better in the military system than it is in the civilian system, in the criminal courts. The breakdown of jury voting can be good and bad. I mean, the question of not having to have a unanimous acquittal is something, because all you got to get is more than a third. And we did all the math, and and it's funny, in the Hicks they just knocked it down to where all of a sudden, so instead of having 7 jurors, we had 3, because we ended up getting a couple disqualified. So, but that really changes the percentages of what you have to do. It's really an extraordinary difference when you look at trying to convince, 2 out of 3 as opposed to 3 out of 7. It's very different. Or 2 out of 7, I should say. Right, 2 out of 7, and so, but I've never taken the position that a properly constituted military commission would not be a viable means to try a war criminal. That raises a second question also, which is, what is a war criminal? I think that much of what we're talking about, particularly when you're talking about Abu Muttalib, the Christmas Day underwear bomber, you're talking about a criminal offense, and plain and simple, not a war crime. And the question of whether you can backdate war crimes to define them now and charge them for conduct before they're ever delineated as war crimes. But you can't erase that 8 years, and that's the problem.
Anthony.
I guess for me, I think I love the questions you asked, Dina, because they're the hardest ones. I don't think that's a half of loaf that I would bother eating. Frankly, I think just for all the reasons you say, the implications, the precedent behind it, the fact that the jurors are going to be military officers, not a jury of American citizens, troubles me. And I think, frankly, this will come as no surprise, our whole goal is to blow these commissions up just like we blew them up under the Bush years. We'll play for time. We'll show just how bad they are. We will roil it. We did it. We gave it when we jumped in after Boumediene and we said, okay, now they have rights. What do we do to make sure that these rights are secure? There's not much you can do to secure their rights. You can blow up that military commission system. And that will be, I think, the next round of what we do. Now, if you wanted to diffuse me, which is often the question, I think that some of you want to kind of make it harder for me to do my job, I guess someone could get up there and say, we're going to run these military commissions in a very transparent and accessible way, and we're going to uphold every single legal standard, and we're going to that you would have in Article 3 courts, and we're going to resource this case just like we would at Article 3 courts. But if they're going to push forward, Obama wants to push forward and use the military commissions, set a really high bar so that the likes of me can't be jumping over that bar too easily, although we'll try.